So Andrew Scheer has resigned as the leader of the Conservative Party of Canada. So we're going to get into this story by Global News, but as with every story, there is only a partial truth, and then there is a lie mixed in there, because we have figured out the truth about what is going on with Andrew Scheer, and it's not quite what they make it seem. But as this article says, Conservative Party leader Andrew Scheer is resigning. His resignation came as a direct result of new revelations that he is using Conservative Party money to pay for his children's private schooling, according to Conservative sources who spoke with Global News. Now, I don't like it in stories such as this where it's not a huge story. It's not like a huge story where a whistleblower being exposed can put them into danger, but then they use an anonymous source like this. They just say conservative sources have said. I always get a little apprehensive at this because I've seen this used many, many times over. This was used a lot when it came to some of the stories about Donald Trump, where they just say an anonymous source said, and then it'd be some bullshit story. But moving on. Senior Conservatives say the expenditure were made without the knowledge or approval of the Conservative Fund Board, including the chair of the board. There were also calls for the party president to resign over the schooling expense. Quote, I just informed my colleagues in the Conservative caucus that I will be resigning as the leader of the Conservative Party of Canada, and I will be asking the Conservative Party National Council to immediately begin the process of organizing a leadership contest, end quote, Scheer said in remarks to the House of Commons shortly after the news broke. In order to chart the course ahead in the direction his party is heading, the party needs someone who can give 100%. Scheer urged members to stay focused and vow whoever wins the leadership contest will have his full support. I only ask my fellow Conservatives is this: let's stay united. So, just quickly going over the last comment, I don't really think Andrew Scheer could say, let's stay united. The Conservative Party got fractured last year, and that was a failure of his leadership. But I digress. That's just a small thing. Now, here's the thing about what I was saying is how there's a partial truth, and then there's a lie. What I mean by a partial truth is the information that we have here. Let me just move myself. And what it says here, this is from Mercedes Stevenson. As is the normal practice for political parties, the party offered to reimburse some of the costs associated for being a national leader and relocating the family to Ottawa. Shortly after Mr. Scheer was elected leader, we had a meeting where I made a standard offer to cover costs associated with moving his family from Regina to Ottawa. This includes a differential in schooling costs between Regina and Ottawa. All proper procedures were followed and signed off on by the appropriate people. And as Mercedes Stevens says, statement by the Conservative Party president, who he personally made the offer to Scheer to cover costs of moving his family from Regina to Ottawa, and that includes costs associated with schooling. It includes costs of schooling, but as it says here, it says include the differential in the cost of covering schooling. So it's not so much that Scheer was just sneakily going around behind the party's back and was stealing funds in order to send his kids to school, but this was agreed upon by the party leader, and at least according to the party leader, that this was everyone signed off on this. And then we also have this over here where apparently the Conservative Fund Board did not have any knowledge or did not approve of this. So it's hard to say right now which one is true, but we do know that this was at least agreed upon by the Conservative Party leader and Andrew Scheer on this. Now, that being said, I still find it a bit ridiculous because there's something like $150,000 to $175,000 that an MP makes to sit in Parliament. Do you know how much MPs sat last year in Parliament? 75. That's the number I've seen. 75 days they were in Parliament. Because they get the summer off, don't forget that. And then Parliament is dissolved leading up to the election. And then after the election, they haven't had this. They just had a sitting just the other day. They just started back up like this past week. So they had about 75 days that they were in office, and they got paid $150,000 to $175,000. So Scheer could have afforded to school his own kids, and no doubt that these are kids going to private schools. So I just think it's a little ridiculous, but this was at least agreed upon beforehand. Whether the Conservative Fund Board knew or not is the question. Scheer has been facing an uprising within the party for weeks over concerns that his social conservative views cost the party a stronger showing in the election which Prime Minister Justin Trudeau won with a minority government. Scheer has refused to march in pride parades and is opposed to abortion, both issues that Conservative Party insiders have flagged as major problems for voters in the riding of the Greater Toronto Area and Quebec, both key to determining who will form government. I disagree on this one. How they say that his social conservative views are the reason he cost him an election. I actually think it's the opposite. I think people wanted to have him a firmer stance on his social conservative views. They're right. This wouldn't exactly have gone over well with Quebec and in the Greater Toronto Area. And again, I've talked about how important the GTA is in order to win an election. But I think that many people, when you actually talk about how abortion is in Canada right now, they'll actually change their tune. And like you say, you can get an abortion right up to the point of birth. Most people say, okay, that's ridiculous. When it comes to the gay pride parades, as we're hearing more and more stories about these trans reading story hours to young children and the sort of demands that are being made, I actually think the majority of Canada is starting to would like to see some more social conservative views. The problem is Andrew Scheer didn't stand by his social conservative views. He's not going to march in the pride parades, okay. He also said he wasn't going to open up the abortion debate, and this was under his leadership. Just last year, there was also even some that were pushing for trying to get, right now, the Conservative Party is considered a pro-life party. They were trying to get that changed. Now, I don't know if you can necessarily put that on Andrew Scheer, but that happened under his leadership, at least. But then there's something else that's happened. I've talked about for some time the red Tories that are starting to take over the Conservative Party, that there's more and more of them that are appearing up. We had Michael Chong, who ran for the party leadership. I don't think he made it very far, but this was a guy who was talking about we need to implement a carbon tax. You have Michelle Rempel, who wants illegal immigrants to have a pathway to citizenship, who voted in favor of Bill C-16. And then you have Lisa Raitt, who also voted in favor of Bill C-16, who wanted the Mulrooney chick. What's her name? Caroline Mulrooney. Who wanted Caroline Mulrooney to win the Ontario Progressive Conservative Party leadership pretty much just because she was a woman. Lisa Raitt, who also ran for the leadership of the Conservative Party. Lisa Raitt was the deputy leader of the Conservative Party until she was voted out of office this past election. So just a month or so ago. And now, who's the new deputy leader? The new deputy leader is... I'm going to move myself back down here. I meant to do that after. The new deputy leader is the former Liberal candidate, Leona Alislev. I will have a strong voice. New Conservative deputy leader looks to help party woo Ontario voters. Scheer announced on Thursday that former Liberal MP Leona Alislev would become his number 2 in caucus, as he also rebuffed calls to step aside on November 28, 2019. Now, even leading up to when she crossed the floor, which was last year, if I'm remembering, last summer, even leading up to this, she was praising Justin Trudeau and critical of the Conservative Party just weeks beforehand. And then she crosses the floor and she starts taking it to Andrew Scheer as if taking it to Justin Trudeau as if he's a terrible leader. But apparently that didn't stop her from standing up in the House of Commons talking about how great of a leader he was just weeks beforehand. And now she's the new deputy leader of the Conservative Party, which means that, well, I guess it doesn't really mean that, but Scheer said he's going to stay on until his new leader is selected. But if Scheer decides to leave from his position, then that means she's in charge of the Conservative Party. A former Liberal is in charge of the Conservative Party. Not that I can prove it, and I could be way off base with this, but I always got a feeling from this woman, Leona Alislev. I always got this feeling that she was a plant, a Justin Trudeau plant. Just another person who has gone over, whose whole point was to start changing the Conservative Party even more to a left-wing party than it already is. Now, she doesn't have the leadership yet, but in one short year, she goes from being a liberal to being the number 2 in the Conservative Party. I think that's pretty fucking concerning. When it comes to Andrew Scheer, I'm not going to miss him. I mean, fuck. I don't really care that much because, as I stated leading up to the election and just a little after, the Conservative Party doesn't want somebody like me in there, so I really don't care very much. But he was fucking weak. He could sit in the House of Commons and he could chastise Justin Trudeau on this scandal or that scandal. But at the end of the day, he was a weak leader who didn't know how to connect with the average Canadian voter. I think that if Justin Trudeau didn't have so many scandals under his belt, if so many people were not as disillusioned with him, if this was, say, somebody else who did an alright job, at least according to Liberals, who did an alright job as the first 4 years as Prime Minister, Andrew Scheer wouldn't be anywhere close to where he was. The problem is not that Andrew Scheer was so charismatic and that he brought more people over to his side. The problem is that Justin Trudeau was so unlikable that he lost those people and then brought him over to the Conservative side. Because the swing voters go between those two. They go between the Conservatives, they go between the Liberals. So Andrew Scheer didn't bring those people over. It was Justin Trudeau being so hateable. But let me know what you think in the comments below about Andrew Scheer and his resignation. I mean, we know that the media has been pushing for this for some time. Some people have been suggesting because Andrew Scheer is a threat to Justin Trudeau and the Liberals and the media. No, he's not. No, he's not a fucking threat to them. He's just another Conservative Party leader. If he was a threat, we would have seen it in this past election just a few months ago. But he didn't prove himself to be that much of a threat. But let me know what you think in the comments below. I'm Adrian Loyne. This is just my stupid opinion.